value a cut to the building or accounting department, and I appreciate that. It's important to note that just like the firefighters have come forward and said that 40-hour personnel positions have been eliminated, within just about every department in the township, positions have been eliminated. We have been able to make those reductions in staffing through attrition and not layoffs. But in just about every department, we're gonna look where there were 2 people, there's 1, or where there was 3, there's 2. So there have been cuts in other departments, so I wouldn't want anyone to think that the other departments haven't experienced attrition and we're only looking at cuts in the fire service. And again, I can't state enough, I certainly made it, and I've tried to say it here, to put a budget before this board based on 6.67 mils, there's a need to make some reductions in the amount of money being spent for fire service. I suggested 3 different ways that we've done that, but I said very clearly in the budget workshop, and I'm saying here tonight, it would be our hope that we would not look at layoffs as a means of getting to that number. But one way or another, we either have to reduce the amount we spend or increase the amount that we collect. And I agree with any of those residents who came forward and said that there's absolutely nothing wrong, as long as we divide these 2 issues in this board member's position, in trusting the residents to make the decision at what they'd like to fund and what level they fund it. I believe that's what got each of us here, is because we asked folks to support us, and folks have that freedom and right to campaign and to vote. And I think that when it comes to this millage question, in the past, when we've been able to offer a renewal, we've seen 70% numbers because the voters approved that. That's a stake in the ground. 6.67 as a renewal is probably a pretty safe assumption. The question is, as the one resident said, would folks be willing to pay $38 more or $100 more or whatever that number is? Well, that's gonna vary from house to house. So if we separate those questions, we give the voters the opportunity to decide if what value they place in that service, and not, I'm not gonna guess what that number ought to be, but that's something for this board to decide. The question before us now, the motion that we have on the floor, is 6.67 mils for 3 years, and we have renewal language that reflects that. So I don't know if there's any other discussion or if we want to vote on that.
Call for the question.
No, thank you.
All right. Is everybody good? Do we need to call for the question?
No, just
I
go.
mean, are we
Let's-
good with the
let's-
vote? Are we
let's
done
make
with
the vote.
debate?
Let's
Right?
take a vote.
Okay.
Do a roll call, Mr. Burkett?
Yep. So we've got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Witt to adopt the resolution placing the 3-year millage renewal question for 6.67 mils on the August 6th, 2013 primary election ballot. Mr. Witt?
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. Swikowski?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Verkest?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Board. All right, well, I would call for public comments, but I'm gonna guess there's probably a better
Chairman.
suggestion. I'm
Chairman.
teasing, I'm kidding you.
We talked about a split issue, and at this point,
I
I'll make
understand.
that motion.
I understand.
That, we levy up to a $0.5
Sure.
for fire service operations for 3 years.
Now, just as a question, is there any value in somehow tiering that number, or is this an up to a $0.5 that you're
Up to a
proposing?
$0.5.
Okay.
So this.
Can we make it a half mil?
There's not a second, but I guess we get a second, then we go into discussion.
Sure, yeah, so we've got a motion by Mr. Swikowski for an additional $0.5 for fire services for 3 years. True? Right?
That's your motion?
Okay,
Support.
okay. All right, now we'll enter into discussion. No, I'm sorry.
The debate, the question right now is whether or not to form another ballot language question similar to what you have, adding
Yes.
up to another half mil. Okay,
Right.
I understand.
Yep.
Separate.
Yep,
Yeah,
separate
separate
question,
question,
right, 2 questions, proposal 1, proposal 2.
Okay.
Knowing that 2014 is structurally what I'd call our worst year, and knowing that we're looking at a projected increase in revenue and increase in property value as we go forward, I'm questioning if there's any value in somehow tiering that millage question, maybe say 6/10, 4/10, 2/10. Somehow trying to explain to the voters, I guess, that in proposing that question, we're saying that we want to work to get back towards 6.67 mils, but that we know that at this low point in the property value, we've got our greatest need next year, perhaps a little lesser need in 15, I'm sorry, next year, meaning in, 14, lesser need in 15, so that we're showing that a projection to go toward that. And I understand the value in a number, and then we get to adjust that and levy the amount we need, but I see some value in trying to project our intentions by tiering that proposal.
And I would agree with that, that option as well. One of the things I hate to see is residents entering into a 10-year millage, especially with the assumption that, taxable values are gonna increase and more people don't understand in that 10th year, when they're locked into a single rate, it may be $38 today, but in 10 years, it's gonna be $380. People don't understand that. So if
Yeah, that would be pretty
No,
high,
and
but I get your point.
I understand. The point I'm trying to make is people don't understand that they get into something at a low value, but at the end of 10 years. So I think I see value in tiering that. I think we would realize, we meaning the township, fire department, general fund would realize, a consistent amount of revenue, as the taxable values increase, right, over the 3-year period.
Right, and again, I threw those numbers out, they're not based on massive research on my part. I mean, clearly at this point, what we're doing is we are projecting a need that we haven't quantified yet. But we're acknowledging the fact that we've been structurally spending at a deficit level. So there's a need at this lowest point to do something. The concern that I have is, we are representatives of the people. So when someone says, well, why have you proposed a millage increase? By its very nature, I'm saying it's to get us through a historically low point. So we're showing that we're trying to tier this out. We're working toward that eventual goal of eliminating the structural deficit. That's the reason why I see value in it, because there's a difference between me saying, well, I'm gonna ask you for a half mil for 3 years. Well, what happens after 3 years? There's a certain cynicism that people bring to these things that says, well, as soon as you approve that half mil, it's there forever.
Right.
And that may or may not be
I
true,
agree with that.
but when you vote for it, that's what it sounds like. So when I say, well, look, we're gonna work toward covering that issue now, and we're gonna continue to work over a 3-year period to get toward a point where we don't need a stopgap or an additional assistance, and we're hopeful, we're projecting that with property values coming back and, working together with the union and looking at long-term things to, even out our costs, we think that we can do it with this. And so now, when 2016 comes and you're gonna ask me, what do you want for 17? Well, I guess I'm back to, 6.67. I'm sure not gonna predict where we're at 3 years from now, but the point is I'm trying to send that message that we're doing something now because of unprecedented drop in property values. And as property values begin to increase and people's taxable value starts to come back, we're lowering that millage rate to try to even out that burden. Doesn't mean it has to be that way, but I'm just suggesting that as food for thought.
If I could ask the attorney a question. Rob, if we were to set those tiered levels, would those be set in stone, or would they still be impacted by like a rollback in, like in the second and third year? I know it's not an easy question off the top of your head.
We don't
but-
think we're gonna have a rollback. I talked to Carol about that yesterday.
Well,
She doesn't think we're gonna have a rollback, and if there's gonna be, it's not gonna be much.
It wouldn't be
But I'm-
significant,
but I'm
but
just asking-
it's a
I'm just
valid
asking
question.
how
How
it
does
would-
it work?
It's the rollback, but if there is a rollback, it has to be considered,
okay.
yeah.
She didn't think there was gonna be one,
No.
but, and she said if there was one, it was gonna end up being
Well,
pretty minimal.
I was just more asking, like, because we're setting a specific rate for those each year, it's not the same year, does it still impact it or not? But
Yeah.
Cause you get it
it's
from
that-
growth.
Yeah. So the point being, 6/10 of a mil on a $150,000 home's $45. The second year it's $30. The third year it's $15. So you're basically saying to the voter, we've got a low point. We've got to avoid deficit spending. We've got to address some some, need within the fire hall, for delayed maintenance. So we're asking for $45 the first year, $30 and $15. That's what this proposal is, try to even out this low point.
But this isn't covering delayed maintenance, this is just
Yeah.
maintaining
This
what
is
we
to
have.
maintain.
Yeah, let's
Well,
not
no.
confuse
Delayed
issues.
maintenance,
I was
it's
very,
two separate issues, that's
Okay.
what I was trying to say before.
Right, six tenths of a mil is generating almost $500,000.
And
And
with
that
the
is-
400,000 that we cut out of the budget with those layoffs, plus the 130 that's there, that's 530. So if we raise 500, we're just covering what we need to.
Understood,
But
but
you're
that
not
assumes
touching the
that there's
rainy day
no
fund.
negotiations. That assumes that we just renew the contract as is. The firefighters have been, I don't know if I'd say outspoken, I don't know what the right description is, but they've certainly been upfront in saying that they're prepared to come to the table. What they've said to me is, we're not sure that we can get to $400,000 out of 27 men. And I understand their concern. What I'm saying is a 6/10 of a mil is gonna cover that deficit. And if we look at some negotiations, some savings and some strategic changes to the contract, that would generate the funds that we're talking about that might go from a deficit spending to having some funds available for infrastructure type work. That was my point.
I think, you know, this is coming out of the blue here tonight. We have no question, no sample questions on here. But if you're gonna sell this, like I said, as an apparatus and this and that, then you better put that in the
I
question.
haven't said that. I have not said that.
If we're gonna sell it, well, no, that's what we're hearing. We're gonna get
No,
a
it isn't. He said it was for fund fire operations. That's
We're-
all he said.
Right, but I keep hearing that, oh, we need these extra items, just like Mr. Capel said. If that's what you want it for, which I might even vote for apparatus and some building maintenance and things. But if it's going to wages, salaries, and all of that, I'm not gonna vote for that. And I'm gonna tell you, if anybody here thinks that this board is gonna say, well, we're gonna go up to 0.5 mils, and we're not gonna levy 0.5 mils, no, that isn't the way it works. Because the fire union can easily go to arbitration and say, well, you had a half a mil, but you only levy 0.2. Come on, we all know that. I lose that at arbitration every day. And I'll pay $20,000 for the privilege to go have that question answered. So if you're gonna do 0.5 mils, just tell the people what you're gonna do. It's gonna be half a mil. It's not up to.
So, Mr. Supervisor, I think what I'm hearing is there's some collaboration on, that we want to put something on there, put it to the voters relative to fire services. Would it be advantageous at this point, since we're just pulling numbers out of the air, is to table this until the next meeting, so we can come up with some language?
Correct.
And some actual verbiage
Right.
that we can, smartly vote on, because right now,
Yep.
I think this is something, again, I think we're all, from what we haven't taken a vote, but I think the collaboration is there to put something together. But rather than just pulling numbers out of the air, let's get something we can vote on at our next meeting. If we turned it in that day, I think we're still good to get on the ballot.
Sure.
And that gives you time to work on numbers and,
I'd like to answer that question.
sure.
I'm fine with that, except for one thing. 2 weeks from now, we'll still be pulling numbers out of the air. I cannot tell you what negotiations are gonna be this year. Hang on, let me finish, because you asked the question. I have no problem. I would support tabling the issue so that it's on the agenda and people have the opportunity to participate in this legislative process. I'd agree with that. But as to delay it so that I can come back with a bunch of numbers, I wouldn't trust the numbers. Well, I mean,
But
because here's the thing, I won't know anything more about the contract.
Well, I get
I
that.
won't know anything more about property values two weeks from now, do you understand? I can give you
I
a
get it,
guess.
But rather
right?
than us, I think you'd have a little bit more control over that, when you look at the numbers and maybe get with the accountant and figure, I'm just figuring you'd have a better shot than I would right now.
We
Let's
don't
say
even have
this.
language sitting in front
Yeah,
of us.
and
So that's what I mean, we don't
I
have
understand
that,
that, but,
so
but
That would
language.
be my suggestion.
Look, guys, you guys know what we just voted on. You know we just voted on 6.67 mils for 3 years. And we know that 5.0435 is going to fire and 1.6265 is going to police. It's the same that we had this year, and we're proposing that moving forward. We all understand that that's what the language is. We don't, how many of us read this new resolution before we voted on it? This is a bunch of gobbledygook, but we know what it means. 6.67 mils for 3 years. That's what we voted on, and that's the number we know. It doesn't even say that, but that's what we know that it means. So we can wait 2 weeks and we can bring back language. I have no problem with that. All I'm gonna tell you is everybody's individual passion won't change. I can't bring back a solid number that says this will exactly navigate us through all the tough times and get us right to a balanced budget each year. I won't have that number. If my answer in 2 weeks was $500,000 for 3 years, there's still the passion side of the matter that says, well, yeah, but if you go out with that, you're in essence sending a message to some voters who can be cynical, and we're all guilty of that at times. I don't even know if you have to be guilty about feeling cynical. But you say, well, it sounds like they just want $500,000 forever. Well, no, we only asked for it for 3 years. Yeah, but you only asked for 6.67 for 3 years, but we know what you're gonna come back with in 16, for 17, you're gonna come back with 6.67. So my point is, no small part of the question is what is it that we intend to do long-term, and the language that we might propose is gonna determine that. So in essence, what you're saying is, Ken, go back and draft language, that's fine, but guess what, I'm gonna draft it what I think is best, because that's what you told me to do. And I'm gonna put it before you, and if you don't like it, we're gonna debate it, and we're gonna still come up with two things: an amount of mills per year and a duration of time. We can decide that just as easily now while we're in the middle of that debate. If we table it, I will be forced to come back and give you numbers. They won't be based on too much more than dartboards and emotion.
I would disagree. I think what that gives us a chance to do is to regroup, sit down with the chief.
That I value.
Figure out where we're at. I didn't bring a budget tonight.
Nope.
I didn't know this was,
I understand.
going through these budgets. We can sit down and have, at least the three of us can, and,
Sure.
whatever.
Right.
I don't know what we need.
I said, I think there's value in the legislative process. Correct.
Regroup. What we have
Right.
right now is everything tossed up in the air. We don't know if we're buying apparatus.
I get
if
it.
we're,
What I don't want,
fixing a building. I don't know that right now. We
understand.
have about 50 things on the table.
right. What I
No,
don't
I-
want is a motion from the board saying, Ken, go back and give us good numbers so we can vote on them, because I can't do that at
But
this
but
point.
I will tell you what, at least at that point when you regroup, you at least know a little bit more where you're at. Right now, I feel like I'm just on quicksand.
I understand.
And
I get that.
I just want to go back to what I had said earlier was, when we have the fund balance to get us through this year and next.
Right.
And if we're in a position next year, I mean, we have 2 free elections next year that we're not gonna, and I think, we have bigger problems than just making it through and covering the guys. I honestly don't think that we're gonna sit down and negotiate. We don't have that kind of relationship. We're gonna be butting heads and fight. We're gonna come up with something, but we need to fund for that apparatus. We can look at it next year, and we're gonna know exactly what that extra amount needs to be able to fund those purchases.
We'd have potentially a 3-year contract, so we'd know what our issue was in 14, what our shortcoming was, and what we might need in 15 and 16 to make that up, as well as cover the years 15 and 16. So it's a valid point.
And I think in the end, I don't think anybody's, and I know as soon as people hear layoffs, that's the emotion, but I don't think anybody up here has really got the stomach to actually follow through on that. Because we respect the job
Nobody
that's
has the stomach. Why the hell do you put it in the budget?
because we have
I had
limited
explained
choices
that.
as
No.
far as
Right.
tools that we
Oh,
can
I
mean,
reflect
let's call
monetary
a spade a
reductions in the
spade.
budget.
I understand, Jack, but I tried to explain that. One way that we did it was a prior supervisor went through and said, well, I'm gonna just strike this benefit, this benefit, and that benefit.
500,000, and their attorney said you're lucky if you get 2.
Right.
So call it, say, spade
So that's a-
spade. So let's not.
Right, so that's a bad approach. But
Exactly.
the problem is I'm saddled with the responsibility of having a budget workshop, talking about a millage in May that we're gonna vote on in August that won't even come into play until after we have a contract. It's a crummy process, but I don't get to make the rules. So I had to bring to the board a budget based on 6.67 mils, and then the board can say, hey, wait a minute, we don't like the idea of layoffs. Well, the only way we're gonna avoid that is either get all the savings we need in negotiations, but if we can't get it, and an arbitrator doesn't give it to us, we have no other means of getting it because of the rules. So what's the only other tool we have? Layoffs. I'm not saying, I said it 1,000 times already, I don't want layoffs, but I don't have any other tool to get there. So I can't show a budget prior to entering in negotiations and saying, well, we gotta hold tough to this number, unless I have some method of saying this is how important this number is to both sides.
And I think at this point in the budget, in the end, we can go, we're just gonna take everything from fund balance and cover any deficit there is. But at this, we're 8 months away when this was done. before we're even gonna adopt the budget. It doesn't make sense to say, hey, we're gonna pull in fund balance and just be done with it. That's not budgeting, that's just throwing numbers together to be done.
Does anybody know our labor costs next year?
Well, it's in the
I'm just asking, does anybody know our labor costs next year?
Well, we don't have a contract for next
Thank you,
Right.
thank you. But yet, we're gonna take that and we're gonna say, oh, well, just pick a number, a mil, half a mil, 2/10 of a mil.
Right.
That's what we're doing.
But in essence, that,
But right
but that's
now,
what,
but
that's
right
what we'll be
now- but
forced to
right
do
now-
this,
but right
at this
now-
point.
But right now, I haven't even had a chance to look at all this, to come up with even some type of logical explanation for any number that I pick out of it.
I get that,
out
I
of the
agree.
air Right now.
I agree with you. I said, I think
Period.
it's best to.
That's all that I'm saying.
Out of respect for the legislative process, to
But-
take this up at a future meeting.
Well, that's what I said. But
I
if-
agree.
But if we want to do that, then let's do it. If we're not, then let's sit here for another 3 hours and debate it out.
Well, then the only way we're gonna move forward on that is either to talk about it some more, vote on this motion, or, the folks that made the motion, remove the motion. Those are our options.
We have a motion in support. Why don't we open for public comment?
Well,
Well,
it,
that-
I mean, it doesn't make sense to open a public comment if we're gonna pull the money.
Well, we don't know if we are.
Yep,
I would ju- well,
okay, no problem.
Bill Servil, resident. I have a couple of suggestions for you. It's been discussed that if you throw this money into the budget, and if it does pass, I mean, onto the ballot, and it does pass, you've lost a negotiation chip. What if you were to put whatever the amount might need to be, there's quite a bit of a shortfall in both the fire healthcare fund and the pension fund. Those are still benefits to the fire department, and those are obligations the township has that you have to meet every year. If you dedicated a millage, whatever you're talking about, and I suggest only doing 1 year. As it's pointed out, you have other elections coming up next year. You could do this again if it was necessary. But dedicate this millage so it's off the table as far as negotiation for wages and benefits, but it still benefits the fire department and it benefits the citizens. Because we do have that obligation to pay the pensions and to provide that health care. And my second suggestion is even more important. Why don't you shift the contract end date to the middle of the year so that you don't have this problem that was discussed earlier? Make it July 1st. Go out 2.5 years or whatever it is instead of 3. You decide when you want to do it. But, you know, make a lot more sense because you're never going to have budget numbers until at least April. So why do you have it expire at the end of the year? Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, Andy Hood, President of the Firefighters Union. Support the motion Mr. Smetowski made. What we need is a stopgap to get us through the bottom of where the property values bottom out and we're starting to rebound. 3 years gives us plenty of time to look at this, evaluate where the costs are gonna be, and come forward at the end of this millage. With the millage, it'll keep the fire department funded. I think you guys are on the right track with this millage, and I'd encourage you to adopt it today. No one's asking you to raise taxes. What we're asking you to do is let the citizens have a voice in the process. Put the question out to the citizens, poll the citizens, and see what they think. They're the ones that get the service as well as the board here. You're all citizens. Let the citizens decide the issue of public safety in the township. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. And I guess I'll just summarize by saying we've got a motion, we can vote on that motion, we can bring this back at a future, we can do any number of things. So, Mr. Switkowski, you've heard some of the debate. Are you still good with your motion?
Yes, sir. There's no other business. You know, I'll call for the question.
Yeah, no, understood. I got you. All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Switkowski with support by Mr. Brado I guess I'm gonna modify that motion slightly. Direct the attorney to draft a resolution and language reflecting up to a $0.5 mil for 3 years for fire services for years 14, 15, and 16. If that's an acceptable amendment, I think that was the spirit of what that motion was. Continued support. And of course, that would be placed on the ballot once he draft that language. Mr. Witt, will you take a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Mr. Swakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Caprell?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. York?
No.
Mr. Witt? No. Mr. Verkust?
No.
Motion carries.
At this time, we can open up the floor for public comment.
I think you're gonna find,
Well, let's save that for board comment, right? This-
I just
at
wanna
this-
say this and then I'm done with this.
I understand,
whole
but
debate.
that's why we have board comment, once public comment is completed.
You wanna say something?
Yep. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Good evening, Board. Matt Czar, Harrison
Oh,
Township
5 minutes, I'm
Firefighters,
sorry.
Local 1737. Just want to address a couple things here today that were said in, I don't think they were meant to be malicious. Just wanted to clear it up on behalf of my members. As a proud member of the International Association of Firefighters, Local 1737, our worldwide slogan for all firefighters across the world that we represent is always on the front lines. Now, some may take that and say, well, you guys are always on the front lines fighting fires or doing EMS, but it's much more than that, you see. We not only fight fires and do EMS, we provide public education. We provide fire inspections. And those things all, because we don't have the 40-hour staff, pull us out of the station. So a day like today, when we did have 9 guys scheduled, we had 1 firefighter out in, I believe, Romulus, improving his skills on how to do car extrication. We had another firefighter at Graham Elementary teaching 5-year and 6-year-olds fire safety. We had 2 men in a ladder truck over at South River School putting up the ladder, the aerial, to take a photo of the 5-year anniversary of that brand new school that was approved by the voters. You see, we're not here just to tout that we fight fires and we provide EMS. We're here to tout that we truly care about the public service here in Harrison Township. And if we didn't, we could easily tell this man over to here, no, we're not doing public ed because it's 3 o'clock. Our contract says so. And no, chief, we're not doing inspections because we're at minimum manning. But we don't do that, you see. We take what was given to us and we do it for the public safety. And I just want to tell you that from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate what you guys have done here tonight. Now, no, it doesn't. It doesn't bridge the gap, and we know we're still underfunded, but it's something in the right direction. So on behalf of not only the firefighters here in Harrison Township, Macomb County, and the Michigan professional firefighters, on behalf of all firefighters across the country, we want to say thank you for doing the right thing.
Thank you.
Is this public comment at the end of the meeting, so I get
Yes.
this right? I just don't want to
5
interfere with
minutes.
anybody else.
You can talk about turtles.
5 minutes. We've talked about turtles.
Okay,
before.
That's what I'm saying.
I couldn't make it at the beginning of the meeting, so it's Linda Karczewski from Harrison Township Historic Commission. I don't know if you told about our open house. Did you did? Okay, that it's on,
We even gave away your phone number.
on June 6th. I just want to tell her that we are not having a meeting in May for the annual meeting. We're going to have it on Thursday, June 6th, to get ready for the open house. And my phone number is 586-463-1754. And we'd like to ask if anybody out there would like to bake some cookies for our open house. We'd really appreciate it. Just give me a call. And if you forget my phone number, I'm sure the clerk's office would be glad to give it out again.
The meeting is the 6th, the open house is the 8th.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
All right. And that's what I have to say. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Bill Serville, resident. First, I'd like to thank the board for appointing the last person on the cable committee so I can finally have a meeting. We have some issues we need to address. Then I'd just like to state briefly, without any malignment against the fire department, I wanted to point out that the citizens pay 5 mills out of less than 7 mills, probably less than 9 mills with our bond obligations. So it's a great percentage of all the taxes they pay for local government to support the fire department. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. We're a small community, we don't have much business, much industry that help support things, and we have a lot of lower value homes that don't bring in a lot of money. Five mills on a $50,000 house isn't very much. But I want to still point out that a community like Macomb Township, the millage is something less than 2 mills for fire service. So somehow we have to try to rectify part of that. I don't know what the solution is, if it's uniting with other fire departments, if it's bringing more business in, whatever it might be, we need to correct that because, as it was pointed out earlier, that we don't have Parks and Rec that gets any money from taxation. We have dirt roads. We don't have much of anything. What we do pay for mostly is the fire department. And I'm not saying they don't do a good job and that they deserve, but somehow we have to figure out a different way of doing business. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comment. Mr. York,
I forgot what I was gonna say.
okay? That's all right. I'd like to state for the record, and certainly, oh, I'm sorry.
No, you just-
Chief?
Mr. Supervisor, if I may, just on a lighter note, given Matt Sarr's comments, I think he would be very willing to cook Linda's cookies for
I
the,
think so.
Star
He's,
Cookie.
it's not about fires and EMS, it's about cookies.
Oh, I know.
I'm just teasing you, but I had begun to say, I'd like to clarify for those gentlemen in the firefighters union that are here and for the board, that primarily, I think the right choice is to allow the voters to decide. My no vote is not based on the fact that I believe the concept is a poor one, but my no vote is based on the fact that I believe a flat half mill is less likely to pass. So personally, and you can take this for whatever you want, but I believe that it is a reasonable request to make to the vote, to make to our residents, to the voters, and I would like to see it succeed. I know that I will support it at the polls. The problem that I have is, just as I stated prior, my concern is that there are a lot of folks who can be cynical. And when you say a half mil for 3 years, there are gonna be those folks who might not see that as a temporary millage, but a millage in perpetuity. And I'm afraid that because of that, it has a lesser chance of success. So I fully support the concept, and I know that this board will look at that half mil, and if in the second year it only needs to be 0.38 mils, that's what this board will levy. My concern is that I might not get that chance because I'm afraid that there are those folks who are gonna look at that flat mill, a flat half mil for 3 years and say, no. Once I agree to that, I'm gonna be stuck with that half mil forever. That's not this board's intent, and we'll look at that number each year when it comes time to levy that at whatever drop dead date Mr. Huth tells us. But my no vote was more based on the fact that I think the concept is less likely to succeed than a tiered millage that demonstrates that we're doing it on a temporary basis with an end date. So, but otherwise, I certainly support the work you do, and we can go into all that stuff. I'm not gonna carry on about that, so.
I do have something to say, just put on the record for future, so I can pull the tape. 2 things. First off, since 2004, firemen, I like what you do. I know you guys don't think that, but, you know, it's never been about, you know, personalities or any of that for me. It's very simply the money. You've sat at this, the firemen have sat at that podium. Mr. York, 5 mills, 5 mills, 5 mills. I've gone through it 3 or 4 times. I had the old, you know, Frank Scher, the old union president, sitting in my office arguing with me for seems like hours on end. Fantastic debate, by the way. He never made it personal. You just debated the issue. Nobody ever really got angry. And I'm sure all you guys know that from how Frank is. He's fun to debate. But, you know, it wasn't long ago that we were sitting here and it was 4.8 mils that we wanted to go down. I sat in that office and Mr. York, go with the 5, 5, 5, which I did. And that 5 mils included funding for the retiree health care, funding for that. And that was all said at that podium. You know, I feel a little let down that I'm sitting here now and those things still aren't funded. And now I'm asked for another $0.5 mil, or up to $0.5 mil. And at the end of the day, I'm just gonna say this. If anybody here thinks that this board is gonna say, oh, we're only gonna do 0.1 or 0.2 or 0.3, that's not gonna happen. It's gonna be 0.5, which is fine, that's a $0.5 mil. And if we choose not to do that, I will go on record right now to say that we're gonna be in arbitration, or somebody here on this board is gonna say in some closed session, oh no, the citizens voted on $500,000. That's the shell game. We say up to, but it's not gonna be, it's gonna be, they voted on $500,000. Just like, and we have some evidence of this, just like that whole argument on the Tringali contract. We voted on a 3-year, but somehow that was really a 5-year. And some people on this board made that argument. So however this works out, let it work out. And, but it is $500,000 at the end of the day. And that's what the residents are voting on. And don't think it's anything less than that $500,000.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your comments, Mr. York, but please speak for yourself. That's all I ask you. You know, speak for yourself. Don't speak for 6 other individuals on this board. If that happens, then you can come back and say, I told you so. But please, don't put words out what I'm going to do in the future, because you don't know what I'm going to do.
I agree. Are there any other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Supervisor. Just to, again, I sort of explain the no. I just felt that next year, when we have a better understanding of what our labor cost, I mean, I think the shortfall is such that we could get through it this year and then address more holistically the problems of funding at the fire station, because it's more long-term than even $500,000 for 3 years. The other thing is, I think we should all just take a moment to remember Dick Sheehy, who passed away recently, former trustee here at the township. Maybe if we just do a quick
Yeah, I think it would
moment
be,
of silence.
I think it would be appropriate to observe a moment of silence for a 15-year member of this Board of Trustees. And with that, if there's no,
Do we need to bring some type of resolution back to this board? I mean, I don't know what that language says.
well, really, the motion was to direct the attorney to draft that language and place it on the ballot.
Okay.
I mean, that was the mo-
What if it says, for pensions only?
Well,
What
then,
if it
then
says, I mean-
Mr. Huth will pay the bill for everything.
Well, no,
because
I don't know.
he didn't do what the board told
I mean, we're
him.
getting,
Pretty sure the language is.
this is
was
what I
intended
know.
to
This is
match.
what I know. Whenever we give great latitude on this stuff, it ends up being something nobody wants.
We'll make sure it's circulated to the board members,
right.
but I understand the direction.
And
If
so
any
my-
board member reads that language and feels it's inappropriate, we do have one more meeting, which
There
is
we go.
what I'd really hope to
Right.
say that we would
That'd
address
be
it then.
fine.
So my question would be to, personally, I would like to see something in there that says temporary. The word temporary needs to be in there somewhere.
Well, I was
I
gonna
don't know
say
if
just
legally-
for these years,
That's
it's
why
gonna be
we-
limited to those years.
But even then, I think we need to,
I agree, Larry.
I would
We
like
should
to
say
see something
temporary.
specific that says temporary.
We realize it's gonna be 3 years, but the cynic in the township is gonna say,
For 2014.
well, what about 17, 18, and 19?
Right, right. But
I agree.
no matter how you say it,
You know,
you know.
all right,
it's still-
I understand the direction. I got it. You're gonna see it before the next.
I'm gonna
meeting
tell
here.
you,
If
when I made that motion on the last one about that up to 6.67, I'm gonna tell you, this is gonna fail, right, just because you're putting up to 0.5 mils. And we went through this 7 years ago, and it causes such distress among the citizens because it causes, the board's gonna say, we're not gonna do that. The citizens are gonna say, yeah, you are. And that puts a negative connotation on it, but it doesn't matter to me.
Are there any other
Go ahead.
comments?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
It's moved.
We've got a motion with support to adjourn at a little after 10 PM. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, board.
That's gonna be terrible.